Hello, I'm Arnold Herb with Mount Healthy Community TV. We'd like to invite you to visit Mount Healthy as life was 50 years ago. The business area of Mount Healthy has changed quite a bit, but what we're going to show you is things as they were back then. The business area went from Stevens Avenue in Hamilton to just north of Adams Road. So if everybody's ready, let's go back 50 years and we'll go to our host, Rick Shibby, who will tell us all about it.
Our program starts at William Freese Texaco Station, located at the southwest corner of Stevens and Hamilton Avenues. We will proceed north on Hamilton Avenue, looking at the business district as it was way back when. Mr. Free's family lived in a house right next door to the service station. Mr. Free and his son-in-law, Al Giesling, repaired automobiles as well as filling the gas tanks with good old Texaco Supreme. Notice the bow ties and Texaco hats, which were the uniform of the day long before Uncle Milty made them popular. Nyhard's Funeral Home, which was originally located in the area of Taylor's Creek, Ohio, near Miamitown, was started in 1850 by Andrew Nyhard. The business has been passed down through the generations and was moved to Mount Healthy in 1924. The 1936 ambulance, seen here coming out of the garage, has long been replaced by modern vehicles. But in 1936, the Nyhard Funeral Home served the community with ambulance service. This service continued up until the 70s when the Mount Healthy Life Squad was formed. Nyhard's remains in the same location and is still operated by the Nyhard family. We see here Joe Nyhard and Al Giesling coming out of the building. The Porter Printing Company is still doing business in the same location as it was in 1936 when it moved to Mount Healthy from North College Hill. Leroy and Lorena Porter are shown here with their son Lauren and some of the employees that they had back then. Porter Printing was responsible for publishing both the Home Reporter and the College Hill News. Little Lauren there is now the owner and operator of Porter Printing. Directly across the street from Porter Printing was Catherine's Beauty Shop. The Eugene Wave was a popular hairstyle at the time, as this lady will show us a beautiful example of it. Why, even little girls like to have their hair done at Catherine's Boutique. This is Dr. Hunchy's daughter. And this is owner Catherine Shipler. Right next door was the Mount Healthy Garage, owned and operated by Herman Mullenhart. Herman used that good old Sunoco gas. As we see from the scenes here, Herman was unique in that he not only catered to the four-wheeled vehicle, but was ready when old Dobbin happened on by. Herman and writer Bob McCudden are going to give Dobbin a little ice cream treat. Herman was a very popular person in Mount Healthy and was a veteran of World War I. A little farther north on Hamilton Avenue was the Plaza Beauty Shop. The owners, the Lincolnhofer family, came here from West Virginia. How about those $3 permanent waves? For the male customers, there was a barber shop in the front of the building. Earl Lincolnhofer and his sister May are shown here with some of their patrons and Ralph the Barber. Main Theater was the local movie house in Mount Healthy and remained in business until the late 60s. In the early years, the theater showed silent movies. The theater was run by the Bloom family, and everyone had a part. Bertha played the piano, Ann collected the tickets, Joe Bloom ran the projector, and Pete, the former mayor of Mount Healthy, owned the building, which is used as an auction house today. Admission charge back then was a whopping 5 cents. Here we see Pete and Ed Bloom. The banking business in Mount Healthy started somewhere around 1905. The first bank was a frame building at the southeast corner of Hamilton and McMacken Avenues. From there, it moved to the northeast corner of Hamilton Avenue and Compton Road. When the bank outgrew this location, it moved to the present location of the bank at Hamilton Avenue and Kinney Avenue. Judging from the weight of the bag this depositor is bringing into the bank, one could assume that business was pretty good back then. The bank is in the same location today and is now the Mount Healthy branch of the First National Bank of Cincinnati. First National Bank of Cincinnati has recently changed its name to Star Bank. And here's Gus Hessler. Just to the north across Kinney Avenue was the Ludwig Hutt-owned Hutt Paint Store. Also in this building was the Mount Healthy Electric Shop, owned and operated by Al Shaw. The Charles Lipmeyer & Son Plumbing Supply and Hardware Store was located on the northeast corner of Hamilton Avenue and Kinney Avenue. Mr. Lipmeyer and his son Carl started the business in 1927, and there is a craft shop occupying this building today. The little boys in front of the building are Mr. Lipmeyer's grandchildren. The Mount Healthy Savings and Commercial Bank was organized by a group of businessmen back in 1924. It later would merge with the Second National Bank. The teller's windows were all made of 1-inch thick bulletproof glass. Some of the employees here pictured are Herman Strassel, Clyde Yerkes, Sid Summey, and Carl Ware. Directly across the street from the bank was the C.A. Hunt Hardware Store, which is now the Bishop Hardware Store. Mr. Hunt was a superintendent of the Mount Healthy School District at one time, and his wife, Grace, was a school principal. Back then, one could purchase a single screw or several pounds of seed depending upon your needs, as things were sold in bulk. There are still several good old-fashioned hardware stores around Mount Healthy, but a great majority of these items that they sell are prepackaged, which cuts down on the personal contact between customer and vendor. In addition to being open their usual hours, the hardware store, like the banks, stayed open late on Monday nights to accommodate those who could not get to town during the day. Shown here are store manager Joe Anger and owner C.A. Hunt. The Lindemann Drug Store occupied the building just north of Hunt Hardware. The building is now occupied by Jackie's Restaurant, and it carried all the usual drugstore merchandise in addition to a soda fountain. Pictured here are Doc Lindemann, his two sons, and his niece, Jean Emery. Across Hamilton Avenue is Willem Weber's Grocery Store, which was located next door to where they're still in business today. Willem Weber's was part of the Dot food chain and carried all the Dot brands. And like other groceries in town, a big part of their business was home delivery. Up until a few years ago, they still had a free home delivery service. You'll notice the storefront was covered with pictures and advertising. That was their best part of their advertising, was the storefront windows where you could see all the different produce and the prices. The store is still in business today and is operated by Greg and Gail Willem Weber, brother and sister. Here we see Francis Hall Morris, Nick Willemweber, Norm Fishvoke, and Hap Willemweber. This is Al Hubert and Bob McCudden, owners of the Hubert and McCudden Real Estate Company, which was one of the first real estate companies in the Mount Healthy area. It was located next door to Smythe's Restaurant and Ice Cream Parlor. They would later move their business to Kinney and Hamilton Avenues. And it looks like Bob's about to take a couple out for a look-see on a house. Note that the streets were both lined and curbed at this time. As the sold sign goes up, we see a successful business venture for the Hubert McCudden Real Estate Company. Smythe's Corner, where the Smythe Ice Cream Parlor and ice making plant were located. Mr. Smythe had homemade ice cream back then. The McCullum Drug Store was located on the other corner of Hamilton Avenue and Compton Road. This building was built by a family named Lucky House, and it now houses the Highland Federal Savings and Loan. Pictured here are Mac McCullum, his wife, Adele McCullum Goldsam, and their sons, Jim and Jack. The Stag Cafe was located just west of Hamilton Avenue on Compton Road and was one of the first bars in Mount Healthy. It's still in that same location doing business today. Here we see a delivery by the Red Top Brewing Company. Pictured here are the owners, the Garlic Brothers. This is some slow motion footage of Henry Worth, who was the town marshal in Mount Healthy. He's seen here helping the school children cross Hamilton Avenue and Compton Road. Heine, as he was affectionately known to all the children in the area, became a role model for a lot of Mount Healthy's youth. He was a very gentle and understanding law officer, but when the occasion demanded, he insisted on a firm respect for the law. Heine also rode a motorcycle which enhanced his image, particularly to the teenagers. Here's the memorial to the veterans of World War I in Mount Healthy. This memorial is located on the grounds of the Mount Healthy Park today. And here's Paul Bauer. The Thomas D. Esses dry goods store took in the northeast corner of Hamilton Avenue and Compton Road. As we see from the display windows, it featured clothing for the entire family. Perhaps you viewers might be able to recognize some of these store employees. What would a town be without a five and dime store? Mount Healthy was no different. This is the Mount Healthy five and dime store. And here we see some employees playing with ventriloquist dummies. The 5 and 10 cent store was right next door to S's Dry Goods store. The Atkins Grocery and Meat Store, which was located at 7606 Hamilton Avenue. This building now houses the law office of Larry Keller. As we stated before, at that time there was no need to load the kids in the family station wagon and head for the nearest supermarket. A phone call could do all that, for all the grocery stores had home deliveries. You just phoned in your order to the grocery clerk and told him which items you wished to purchase, and before the day was out, a delivery truck drove up to your door and your groceries were handed to you. Here we see store employee Arnold Weber doing a delivery. Some of the major grocery brands handled by the grocers back then were Libby, White Villa, and Dot. Atkins Grocery Store handled the Libby brand. Perhaps you remember Tasty Bread products or Red Top beer. How about when triple dip cones were 5 cents a piece and ice cream only 35 cents a quart? You see John Atkins, the owner, with his wife Alice and their son Jim, their daughter Bee, store employee Dorothy Bushman, and employee Arnold Weber. And that cute little fella is Jeep Atkins. It was the Schaefer family that started the first general store in Mount Healthy in the 1800s. Ted Schaefer, grandson of August Schaefer, started his own grocery store in 1927 at the location of 7607 Hamilton Avenue. That is now the home of Herb & Kramer Appliances. Mr. Schaefer kept his fleet of delivery trucks busy all the day long. See, back then, grocery stores were a little different. You would walk up to the counter and tell the clerk what you wanted, and he would gather it up for you. The meat department was a custom cut process. If you didn't see the cut that you wanted in the display case, there were usually 2 or 3 butchers on duty to see to it that you got exactly the cut of meat that you wanted. Here we see some of the employees of the Schaefer Company. That's Norm Hunt. Behind him in the hat is Frank Schaefer. The next 2 gentlemen, we just aren't sure who they are. But that's Millie Bach right there and Ellsworth Kaler, and next to him is Helen Schaefer and her husband, the owner, Ted Schaefer. And down there on the end, that handsome fella is none other than Kermit Schaefer. This little boy is about to meet one of the most beloved of the Mount Healthy residents we've ever seen, Albert Lee Sorn. The William Effler Jewelry Store started in 1920 at 7618 Hamilton Avenue. Here we see Bill Effler and his sister Rita. Today, Effler's Jewelry Store is still in the same location and is still operated by the Effler family. Construction contractor Leif Hauer and his crew are doing the brickwork on a building directly next door to Effler's on the corner of McMacken and Hamilton Avenues. This building was to be the future home of Goodwin's grocery store, and the Goodwin building had many, many tenants through the years. One of the longtime tenants was Malone Cleaners. And here's Leif overseeing the workmen. Leif and his crews did a lot of work in the Mount Healthy area. Perhaps your home was built by Leif. Wasn't long till the white villa sign was hanging in the store of Joe Goodwin. As you'll notice here, the storefronts again are covered with advertisement. That's fresh produce out front. Strawberries 20 cents a quart. Potatoes only 25 cents on the half peck. Remember when prices were that low? I'm sure you can. Here's Joe Goodwin, and that's his wife Ruth. We don't know the next gentleman, but down there on the end you'll recognize Agnes Peterson Grunkemeyer. And right next to the Goodwin children, we'll see a picture of Russ Cram. 50 years ago, one of the favorite meeting places for Mount Healthians was Worst Cafe. Worst Cafe was located on the northwest corner of Hamilton Avenue and McMacken Avenues, where Vince's other place, another bar, is located now. Red Worth also had good hot lunches and dinners that he served there, and a lot of the people from the business district like to stop on by, as we see in these scenes. There were meeting rooms upstairs where various organizations could hold luncheon or dinner meetings. And this young lady is Sylvia, Red's daughter, who is now Mrs. Norb Fishboke. And that's her little dog, Fuzzy. Adjacent to the building was the outdoor beer garden, where patrons, weather permitting, could sit outside and enjoy their food and drink. This open space has now been closed in and remodeled into a business. Right now it's a karate store. Perhaps you recognize some of these patrons. And here's Red Worth and some of his employees. Located right next door to Worth's Cafe was George Shearing's Appliance Shop. This building was later occupied for many years by Herb & Kramer's store before they moved to their present location at 7607 Hamilton Avenue. Mr. Shearing featured the latest in electrical appliances, primarily stoves and refrigerators. Here we see George Shearing and his son Glenn loading up another GE refrigerator for delivery. The Chambers range was the Cadillac of cooking stoves at that time. Herman Mueller was a plumbing contractor whose business was located at Hamilton Avenue and Hill Avenue. Here we see Herman working on the Goodwin building. To the rear of his building, he had a workshop, and we see workers coming in and out with different supplies. The florist business was a thriving enterprise in the Mount Healthy area, and one of the early pioneers was Peter Herb, who started his business in 1887. His greenhouses were located at the corner of Adams Road and Harrison Avenues. On this site today is a large apartment complex. Like most businesses in Mount Healthy, the family has become involved through the years. Today, Jack Herb and his son John have a business at Hamilton and Hastings Avenues and also one at Northgate Mall. Pictured here is Catherine Herb Canoe with another employee of Peter Herb's florist. Here's co-owner Chris Herb with his nephew Frank. And that's Chris's son Arnold Herb of Herb and Kramer Appliances. That's Clara Herb, Chris's sister. Here we see many of the employees that kept those flowers so beautiful through the years. A lot of meticulous care goes into the florist business, and Peter Herb Florist was known for having such a beautiful array of wonderful, great-looking flowers. Bert Bittner's filling station was on the north end of town, just past Adams Road. If you look carefully to the right of the screen in this scene, you'll get a glimpse of the old toll house. Mr. Bittner sold Linko Marathon products. Perhaps you'll remember their slogan, serves the heart of the nation best in the long run. And there's John Bittner, a contractor in Mount Healthy. And that's his father, Ed Bittner. And the little boy there is Harold Bittner. Bert Bittner also made signs as well as having a filling station. From left to right, that's Howard Hoshite, Al Hoshite, and the grandfather of the Hoshite family. These are some of the many employees of the Hoshite tailoring business, which was started in 1893. It was located on the east side of Hamilton Avenue, just north of Adams Road. Tailoring was one of the first and most profitable businesses in the Mount Healthy area. At one time, there were as many as 20 tailoring shops in the 1 square mile area that makes up the Mount Healthy community. Generally, the tailor shops were located at the homes of the owners, but after the Hoshite business outgrew the home, this shop behind these employees was built right next door. Summey dairy products were processed right here on the farm located at the north end of Elizabeth Street. Summey Dairy was owned and operated by the Summey brothers, Carl and Harry. Though no longer in business, part of the Summey family still lives at the place where the dairy was located. This section of Elizabeth Street is now called the Summey Subdivision. The Summies had a herd of dairy cows which fluctuated between 15 to 40 head. In addition to cows, you need a good delivery service when you're talking about the dairy business. Home deliveries were a major part of the business back then, in addition to supplying the Assumption School, Mount Healthy School District, and many groceries in the area with fresh dairy products. This is Warren Summey, and in the fedora here is co-owner Carl Summey. Next to him is Joe Coys, an employee, and one of the other employees is sampling the milk here. That's Jan Meyer. Ah, there's nothing like fresh Summey dairy milk. Now, if you look closely to the right of your screen, you're going to see a glimpse of Ray Summey. On the right there, that young boy is Mel Summey. And from left to right, that's Elaine Summey Herb, Betty Summey Oser, and Eugene Summey. And here's May Summey. Here's Richard Wiest making a floral delivery. That's Gertrude Wiest Litkoppler on the left, Richard Wiest in the truck, and that little girl is Lillian Wiest McDaniels. Her husband, Charlie McDaniels, is the fire chief in Mount Healthy. The Wiest Florist was started in 1923 by Richard Wiest, and it has been a family organization ever since. It was family owned and operated until it closed in around 1978. The greenhouses and gardens were located on St. Clair Avenue near Elizabeth Street. The Wiest raised Easter lilies, tulips, hydrangeas, carnations, all kinds of different flowers and bedding plants. Even at a young age, Lillian McDaniel was active in the business, as were all the family members of the Wiest family. Frank X. Rutley started the Mount Healthy Brick Company in 1887. Mount Healthy's brickyard was probably one of the most fascinating business around at that time. It was located on the southern end of Forest Avenue. Mr. Rutley's sons operated the business until 1924, when the machinery was dismantled and the business was sold. The business made about 8,000 bricks per hour. Many of the youngsters in the area were employed at the brickyard during the summer vacations that they had from school. The clay used in molding the bricks was found in the southwest quarter of Mount Healthy and was first used to make drainage tiles. As the business grew, they later made bricks, which were used in a lot of the construction business in Mount Healthy. Many buildings in this area still contain bricks with the name Mount Healthy clearly stamped on them. Here we see some of the bricks going on the dryers as they go along the wire conveyor belt. The land that was used for taking out the clay was left as a veritable wasteland, which some folks used to affectionately call Oklahoma. Children had a different view of this field, though. They enjoyed this area, for they loved to ride their bicycles over the many grooves left in the ground from the horse-drawn wagons and later the delivery trucks. The children would often speed their bikes along and zip over the grooves that had been made by the trucks and the wagons, not unlike the children of today who enjoy riding their trail bikes through empty fields. Here's a brief glimpse of Lou Henshin and his waste collection company. The Mount Healthy Coal and Coke Company was owned and operated by Dave Sunderhouse. It was located at the southwest corner of Forest Avenue and Compton Road. They also made concrete blocks at that time. The Mount Healthy Coal and Coke Company supplied Mount Healthy and the surrounding area with fuel. You see, gas, oil, and electric heating equipment had not been financially practical at this time, and not everyone used it. So most people depended on coal and coke for their heating needs and most businesses around used it to operate their machinery. Here's a glimpse of some of the stockpiles of all the coal and the coke that was stacked on the company grounds. Railroad cars were unloaded at the company station, and the coal was stockpiled until it was to be delivered to those who had ordered it. Most homes had a coal bin built into the basement where the coal could be stored until needed, but deliveries were not only made by the company, but many children picked up extra money for shoveling the coal into the bins. The Order of the Eastern Star, number 365, was organized in 1913. The first worthy matron was Mrs. Mabel Jansen. The ladies shown here were attending a meeting. Everyone wore long white gowns to each meeting, as was their custom. In 1854, families in this area met together to begin what would become the Assumption Parish. The Assumption Church building was built in 1869. It stood on the northeast corner of Joseph and McMacken Avenues. Bricks used to construct the building were made right at that site, and the clay used to make the bricks was donated by Mr. Seward. Joseph Shue, who owned the lot west of the site, allowed the parishioners to erect the kilns which would be used to fire the bricks right on his lot. A new building would be built in 1957. That location is the southwest corner of Hill Avenue and Elizabeth Street, which is the location now of the Assumption Parish. The building was severely damaged on December 28, 1978 by a terrible fire. But the parish members responded to the costly task of rebuilding, and in a matter of months, the damage had been repaired. The United Brethren Church was started in 1833 and met in a building on the grounds of the Hoffner Cemetery, which was located on Perry Street. In 1850, the church building was located then on Compton Road. That is the building you'll be seeing in these pictures. This building would suffice until 1958, when a new building was built at the corner of Compton and Perry, the present location of the church, which is now called Heritage United Methodist Church. The reason for the name change was because the Methodist and the United Brethren merged in 1968. Here we see the congregation with the pastor of that time, the Reverend Robert Pelton. The Trinity Lutheran Church was organized by a group of German families from Mount Healthy in 1853. This building was built on the southwest corner of Hickman and Kinney Avenues, which is the present location of the church, which was built in the same location in 1928. In 1849, two German Methodist families began prayer meetings for what would eventually become the Wesley Methodist Church. This church is now called the Epworth United Methodist Church and is located on Perry Street, just north of Compton Road. A group of residents that were meeting in the Old Free Meeting House organized as a church in 1839. It was then known as the Mount Pleasant Christian Church. The first building was located on the southeast corner of Harrison and Hill Avenues. That was back in 1849. In 1884, a frame structure, which you see here in these pictures, was built on the site where the Mount Healthy Christian Church is now located, which is at Harrison and Hill Avenues. The building was enlarged in 1910, and in 1966, the congregation had grown to the point where it necessitated building a larger facility. The old building was raised to make room for the new one, which you see today. There goes Mount Healthy's volunteer fire department off on yet another run. The volunteer fire department was first organized in 1898. The department was first housed in a livery stable on Compton Road, where the Stag Cafe is now located. Later, a new two-story building was built for them on Perry Street. In 1949, the fire department moved to Perry and McMacken Avenues, where the municipal building is now located. Here's Fire Chief Sam Mortimer, and these are some of his volunteers of way back when. Here comes Henry Worth, police chief of Mount Healthy from 1926 to 1943. Mr. Worth was affectionately known as Worth to all the citizens of Mount Healthy. Those Model T trucks were part of the Mount Healthy Street Department. The service director at that time was Frank Denninger. And that's Joe Pierman, who would later become the chief of police of Mount Healthy. There's Johnny Dreyer. Now let's take a look at some of the other city officials from when this film was made in the 1930s. From left to right, there's Joe Esselman. In the white hat, that's Everett Neiman. Next to him is Frank Schaefer. Next to him is the mayor, Carson Hoy. That's Mr. Klink. Right next to him is Charlie Heckel. That's Walter Korn. And on the end there, that's Fire Chief Sam Mortimer. And here's a shot of Mayor Carson Hoy again. And here's Safety Service Director Frank Denninger. In the background, you'll see a building. That's the old Free Meeting House, which is now the Mount Healthy Museum. Here's the Wesley Werner Post 513 American Legion Auxiliary. The Mount Healthy chapter of the auxiliary was organized in 1929. Mrs. Claire Ruoff was its first president. The ladies took an active interest in civic affairs besides their own special projects such as supplying food and clothing for the needy. The members of the auxiliary also acted as advisors to the junior auxiliary, pictured here. These young ladies are daughters of the American Legion veterans. They organized their own projects with the help of their counselors and did all kinds of social activities. Wesley Werner Post 513 of the American Legion was organized in 1921. They named it after the first Mount Healthian to be killed in World War I. That was Wesley Werner. American Legion is made up of veterans of the United States Armed Forces. Here's Heine Worth. Heine is directing traffic so that the parade can get on. This is probably a Memorial Day parade. And here's the Sons of the American Legion. There's Ed Fetty. The American Legion is made up of veterans of the United States Armed Forces. All these members had to have participated in one of the wars. They lend support to other veterans and their families, visit VA hospitals and nursing homes, donate flags to public schools, promote the Buckeye Boys State and Americanism programs in school. And here comes the American Legion Honor Guard, starting off the parade. Behind them is the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps. That was led by Eamon Carrion and Joe Sorn. Sons of the Legionnaires and the Ladies Auxiliary. There's Drum Major Emil Terrian, and of course, the American Legion Drum and Bugle. We're about to see a close-up of some of the past commanders of the American Legion Post 513. From left to right on the front row, that's Adolph Hoscheit, Bob Haskins, and Ed Hoover. And on the back row on the right is Ed Fetty. It's recess time at the Assumption School. Notice the knickers on the boys here at recess. The Assumption School was built and dedicated on August 5, 1855. The first nuns coming over to teach were there in 1894. There have been many different add-ons to the school, and the school is still serving the students and residents of the city of Mount Healthy and outlying areas. Jump rope was a favorite pastime of the girls, and all the girls wore uniforms, as they still do today. Back then, boys and girls played on opposite sides of the school. We're looking north toward Hill Avenue. The boys seen here are playing where the parking lot is today. That parking lot is a part of the new Assumption School, which was dedicated and built in 1950. The houses seen in the background on Elizabeth Street are much the same today as they were back then. There's Father Seavey, pastor of Church of Assumption. And the bell there announces that recess is over and class is about to begin. Here's the grade school rhythm band. The rhythm band came about as a part of the music program in Mount Healthy. Miss Lula Greener, who was an accomplished musician, introduced it to the school system. She instructed students in singing and formed an orchestra that played for various functions all over the county and state. Her inspiration has carried on through the years, and music has played a major role in the Mount Healthy school system. The Mount Healthy High School band has traveled to several different countries, including China. Here's a shot of the boys' basketball team. This is the elementary school team. And there's the girls' team. Here's a shot of the crossing guards. The crossing guards were used to patrol the streets and obligated to watch out for the grades 1 through 8 as they came out of the building on their way home. In the late 1700s, the first one-room school was built in Mount Healthy. In 1860, the 5th schoolhouse was built where the Gracie Hunt building now stands at Harrison Avenue and Compton Road. All grades were housed at that building until 1929. Mrs. Hunt was the wife of C.A. Hunt, who owned and operated the hardware store in town and was the superintendent of schools. Mrs. Hunt was principal of this school that bore her name from 1929 to 1941. The school remained in operation until a few years ago and is now the Ohio Business College. your right, in the polka dot dress, is Grace Hunt. There's Charlie Nyhard working on a piece of woodwork. The manual training class of Mount Healthy was taught by Mr. Hoffman. He instructed students in the skills of woodworking and the proper use of power tools. The woodworking done here is done in the basement of the building. That building was the high school on Harrison Avenue. Later it would become a junior high and then the freshman building. And it is now the building that is housing the administration of the Mount Healthy School Board. High school classes in Mount Healthy were organized in 1892 as a two-year program. The first graduating class in 1893 had two graduates, Frank Titus and Vern Hoffner. In 1911, it was a four-year curriculum. And here we see the building, which was built in 1928 for the first high school in Mount Healthy. This school had the most modern and largest gymnasium in Hamilton County. The Class B Hamilton County basketball tournament was held there at that time also. In 1962, a new building was built for the high school, which is still used today. This is located at 2046 Adams Road. In the 1970s, the Mount Healthy School District was given an award by the United States government, the Department of Education, for work in integration. Mount Healthy was also the first school district in Ohio to have a building specially made for high school freshmen. The school system was started under the jurisdiction of Hamilton County. It became a city school district in 1951. Back in 1928, students from Finneytown, North College Hill, Springdale, Montfort Heights, and Coleraine used to all come to the Mount Healthy High School. We're going to see some of the teachers from Mount Healthy High School, and we'll be naming them in alphabetical order. Perhaps you'll recognize some of them as they all stand at attention. Miss Arnold, Miss Bolenbacher, Matt Duval, Miss Frost, Miss Hodap, Mr. Earl Muskoff, who later became principal, Mr. Pack, Mr. Petrick, Miss Venata, Matt Duval was also the superintendent of the schools, as well as being principal and a history teacher. Here's a shot of the Mount Healthy High School girls basketball team. Uh-oh, looks like they're going to play a little keep away from Coach Matt Duval. Here's the boys basketball team and their coach, Biff Hoffman. Here's the boys baseball team. And again, the coach is Mr. Hoffman, Biff Hoffman, one of the teachers. Here comes the girls' high school track team. Mount Healthy has won many awards in both boys and girls sports through the years. Throwing the shot put is Ruth Ismail. And there's Ruth again as she shows her athletic ability with the discus. Here's the boys' track team as they practice pole vaulting. Hey, makes it look easy, doesn't he? On the mound is Pete Yerkes. The Mount Healthy baseball team at this time was coached by Biff Hoffman and by Earl Muskoff, and that's Earl taking a few swings there. We've had some great baseball players in our time in Mount Healthy. In the 1960s, Bob Klein, who was an excellent ball player, was killed in a collision. Each year, he is remembered through the Bob Klein Award, given to deserving students. Another baseball player of note from Mount Healthy High School is none other than Billy Doran, the star second baseman of the National League Houston Astros.
I'm Arnold Herb, producer of this video. And I want to thank Rick Shibby for a great job in narration, and Janetta Oakes for all her hours spent in script writing. I want to also thank all the people who helped with the many details, the staff of Community TV, and the members of the Mount Healthy Historical Society. Our hope for this video is that looking back 50 years will create a new interest in the heritage of Mount Healthy.